Whether you're conquering professional exams or personal milestones, we welcome you to Beyond Clean's Confidence Certification, the 52-week test prep podcast series. With expert insights, actionable tips, and engaging discussions, we'll break down the toughest concepts in sterile processing and build your confidence every step of the way. Join host Sarah B. Cruz as she embarks on a mission to help you not just prep for tests, but craft your success story. And now your host, Sarah B. Cruz.
Hello and welcome. You're listening to Confidence Certification, a 52-week test prep podcast series to equip you to take your sterile processing career to the next level. I'm your host, Sarah B. Cruz, and on this episode, we're going to be talking to professionals that have built and run a sterile processing program. Now, the professionals joining us today are either working on a online virtual, thanks COVID, or they have a brick and mortar school, or they're also working an online independent study or like a self-paced course. So fortunately, we also have our work BFF joining us today. Hey, Bobby Parker.
Hey, Sarah. Thanks for having me back on for this one. I love a good panel discussion. I think this is going to be very insightful.
Yeah, I'm stoked. And it's like a little mini panel discussion. So we're used to getting the awesome Beyond Clean hour long. And this one's going to be a little bite sized. So if you like how this sounds, be sure to check out the thousands of continuing education credit on all of Beyond Clean's platforms. They've got some really dynamic panel discussions. All right. So without further ado, Chanté Brown, Harry Mullen, hello. Welcome.
Hello.
Good morning.
Thanks for having us.
Oh, I'm so stoked. This is going to be so much fun. Okay, so really quick, Harry, how long have you been in sterile processing and when did you get certified?
I started in 1988, so we're looking at 35 years. And I finally got certified in 2008. It was 20 years in the industry before I got certified.
Oh, I love that. That's so cool. And it's such a different pace because I know I had to get certified right away because of my state law. So that's such an interesting dynamic. And Chanté, how long have you been in sterile processing and what would you say is your favorite study style? How do you like to study for a test?
So I've been in sterile processing since 2010. So we're working on 13, almost 14 years. And I too, when I first came into sterile processing, I'm actually a surg tech trained. I actually went to school for surgical technology. And at the time, sterile processing departments like to grab up surgical techs because they know the instruments. I also wasn't certified. I didn't get certified until 2014, I think, because it became mandatory from where I'm at. So I've only been certified for less than 10 years. So, and my favorite study style is to read the information and then take notes on it. And then when I go to class, to see what notes I took that match what the teacher is talking about, and then just study from my notes. So that's my study style.
Oh, that's cool because that sounds like a lot of the reader-writer we talked about in on our Learning Your Study Style. But you go a step deeper and it's almost like you cross-reference it to, this is all the stuff I wrote about now. Let me see what actually hits, right? I like that. Bobby, did you think, I would have never thought of that.
No, that's really insightful. The more we can apply what we're learning to the practical, the better it sticks. So I think that's really wise.
That's awesome. And so, first big question though, as sterile processing instructors, what is your favorite chapter to teach in your program? But Harry, you go first.
I would have to say chapter 5. It used to be chapter 6, but with the new edition, they switched them. So 5 became 6, 6 became 5. So for those that are not familiar with it, infection control, because that's what sterile processing does. We are infection preventionists at heart. And that's what I explain opening up the chapter to my students is the difference between us and the Department of Infection Prevention. You know, I call them infection prevention after the fact because they're reactionary, where we have to make sure that patients do not get an infection from the products that we process from the very start.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Chanté, what's your favorite chapter?
My favorite chapter is chapter 2, which is medical terminology.
Yeah.
I just get a kick out of the students trying to pronounce some of those words. I mean, we got to find our fun somehow, right? But also, that's the first chapter that's actually introducing them to healthcare. Because not only are we introducing sterile processing to them, we're actually, for a lot of people, introducing them to healthcare. They've never been on this side of healthcare. They might have been a patient, but have never been on this side. So they might have heard some of those big words and didn't know what the heck the people around them was talking about. So chapter 2 is like their real first introduction into healthcare. So that's my favorite one to teach.
I love that you said that. When I got started in sterile processing, I didn't know what an OR was. Somebody said that, and I had to ask them, like, what does that stand for? So
right.
I thought that like building blocks of medical terminology was really fascinating and interesting, but I know a lot of my peers who were studying alongside me just loathed that chapter. And so that, that taking enjoyment out of their suffering, I think that's really good.
Yes.
So,
trying to get them to say bilateral salpingo-oophorectomy is hysterical.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. What? There's so many O's in this word.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's too good. And Sarah, I know that you're hosting this panel discussion, but because you have some experience as an instructor as well, I want to pitch this question back to you. What's your favorite chapter to teach?
Yeah, so I just want to take a second to point out that none of us said decontamination. I'm just saying, let's call it what it is, okay? Nobody likes to be in there and nobody likes to teach it. No, I'm just kidding. Some people like it. I love teaching sterile storage, mostly because I like teaching about the different case cart systems, like the exchange systems. I enjoy teaching people about how to use a pick sheet and how to pick doctor preference cases and sterility maintenance versus sterility barriers. And there's even a little bit about how to communicate with the OR. And that was my favorite position in the department before I became an educator, was answering the phone and troubleshooting problems. Thanks, Bobby. That's awesome. Yeah, I definitely probably spend too much time teaching that in my class than any of the other chapters. And I think that's a really great segue into the next point or question I wanted to ask was, Harry, how do you start in creating a curriculum? Like, where do you even begin trying to outline what to teach these future of our industry? Like, where do you even start?
Well, it's 2, 3, 4, 5-fold.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, you start with chapter 1, but you kind of have to, in order to create a curriculum for something, I think you have to have the certification. So I first go based on what I know, what I remember that's going to be on the exam. Not to say that I'm teaching to the exam, because I think anybody who's just teaching somebody to pass the exam is doing a disservice to their students. So it's actually twofold. I bring in information that I know that they need to hear for the certification exam. I also bring in specific points that I know that they're going to be experiencing, and I prep them for the actual job, because let's face it, when you get into a sterile processing department, some of the practices can be very daunting and or surprising, where you're like, what the heck? Why are they doing it this way? And so I want my students prepared in knowing what to expect and how to respond to these situations.
Oh, that's great. Because a lot of this season, we talk about incorporating the how with the technicians that are already working in the sterile processing field, and how studying for the certification test will teach them the why. So it's interesting to hear that the curriculum that you're developing is incorporating the how with it. So they're not just going into the facility blind, right?
Right. And a lot of my stories that I incorporate in order to bring the material alive, I tell a lot of the horror stories that I've experienced over the last 35 years. And part of it is just to get the first shock value so I can see the looks on their face, because I love it. And then I tell them how to respond to those situations.
Excellent. That's great. Chanté, do you have the same type of approach when you're working on the curriculum? I know personally you told me that you were updating your curriculum. What is that even?
They changed the book. So I had to update. They added a lot of stuff. I was very grateful. You didn't ask what chapter did we hate teaching, and mine used to be chapter 11 because they just put so much information about flexible scopes. I was like, this is not necessary for this chapter. But they cut that out. So I was happy about that. But yeah, I'm updating it because they changed the book. So I had to make my slides, match what the book is saying.
I like that. Bobby, it sounds like they're updating the curriculum based off of a HSPA book, right?
Yeah, and then also, Harry trying to bring in his personal experience there. What I'm curious about, obviously that curriculum is kind of the backbone of your study. Could you, Chanté, maybe highlight for us like how important you see that curriculum being to the learning experience of your students? Like how significant is having that pathway set out at the beginning for their learning experience?
Well, this is one thing I definitely had to learn. Every job I've ever had, I've always trained people. But training people for the job is much different than trying to teach people because they have to take a test at the end. You know what I mean? So at the beginning, I was like really training them to work in sterile processing. I was like, wait a minute, I got to pull back because I am teaching you so that you can pass this test as well. So I had to figure out a nice formula to have both. So the curriculum, the HSPA book is like our spine. We need that because that actually gives us the black and white how-to, because as we all know, in the field, we're not really doing everything exactly how it is in the book. Like every job has a manual, and then every job in person is like not always 100% with the manual. So I need that 100% because they do have to pass this this test. But I'm also training them because they are going to walk into a real live sterile processing department that's not going to be 100% like this book. And I tell them all the time, like, don't go in there saying, well, the book says da 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 da. You can't do that.
That's right.
They will kick you out. But this is how it should be done, and these are different ways you might see it. That's another thing with the experience. Like Mr. Harry said, you have to have the certification because you need to have experience in order to teach this. Like I can write this out and tell somebody go ahead and teach it, but they can't teach it if they don't have the knowledge behind it, because those words is just words on a page or on a slide. I bring it to life with my real life experiences, and that's how I teach.
I feel like whenever you get into a sterile processing program, that's kind of what you're paying for, right? One, you're paying for the wisdom and experience of that person to put together and chart that course, that curriculum for you and give you that formal structure. And then you're also paying for the wisdom and experience of that instructor to speak into that and highlight for you what is significant, what's important, and having the wisdom to be able to separate out those things that they, as heads up, you might experience this in a department, exactly. But even though it doesn't necessarily come through in reading material all that super well. Harry, what are your thoughts on that? And how do you use that wisdom and experience to develop a really good program?
Well, ditto with what Chanté said. So just so if you didn't hear what she said, rewind this and listen to it again. What I wanted to focus on is be very careful in the selection of the program that you're going to be going into. And the reason being is that not every instructor has the true experience of sterile processing. Here in California, most of the sterile processing courses are taught by surgical tech schools. And so you have a lot of OR technicians that are teaching the course who have had maybe 3 months experience in sterile processing. So all their experience is from the OR side. And as we all know in the industry, how OR wants things done is not necessarily the correct way to do it. So I just challenge the individuals to research the information, the school or the program that you're going to go to. And if you have an instructor, make sure that they actually are a sterile processing technician.
And I think if you're looking for more tips about that, you can definitely revisit last episode where I talk about the red flags and the green flags of picking out a certification program that works for you. And I think it's also important to point out that I teach the CBSPD curriculum. And Bobby leans a lot into why it's important that we incorporate education, formal education aspects into the department. So while I throw that F word around, formal, what does having a formal education, because you guys are run formal programs, right? You have a curriculum, you have a syllabus, you've got PowerPoint slides up the whoop, you know what I mean? So you guys are doing the formal thing. But when I say a formal education, Chanté, what does that mean to you as a sterile processing creator, program creator, and teacher?
Actually, it means you understand the why. Because if you don't have that formal education and you come in, I can teach you how to do this, but it'll be like a robot, like you're just doing it because I taught you how to do it. This is for step 1, step 2, step 3. But when you know the why, you can do it way better. You might even find a different way of doing it to make that process better. But if you don't know the why, you're really just a robot. You're really just doing it off of, airplane mode, really. Like, you're just on autopilot. You're just on autopilot because you don't understand the why. It's just like, oh, well, I'm supposed to do this. And also, like you said, we didn't talk about how we love to teach decontamination. For decontamination, if you don't know that if you don't get this stuff into its enzymatic and you spray it like you're supposed to and all of that kind of stuff, you're just going to be like, well, I'm kind of rushing. I can just put it in the washer, disinfect it. It'll do the same thing. You know what I mean? And you're like, no, there's a reason why you have to have manual disinfection before you put it in that mechanical process. So you have to know the why. And I think the formal education is what makes it the why, because outside of that, I remember back in the day, sterile processing would just get people from EVS and just train them on the job, but they didn't know the why. They were like, oh, that's just how we do it. But why do you do it this way? You know what I mean? So I think formal equals the why.
And Harry, do you think it's possible to learn the why in a self-study, informal setting, dare I say, without that syllabus, without that curriculum? Is it still possible for somebody to be on their self-study journey to gather that why concept? What do you think?
Well, knowing the programs that are, through CBSPD and HSPA, in part, yes, you can kind of get some of it, but you're not going to completely understand necessarily what you're reading. So I would warn individuals that are wanting to do it independently. And when I mean independently, I'm talking about where you just go and purchase the books and just do it completely on your own without any structure whatsoever. I don't think those individuals they'll be able to pass the exam. I have no doubt that in their studies they'll be able to pass the exam, but it doesn't necessarily allow them to understand fully when they get into a sterile processing department, again, the why behind what it is that you're doing. So that's going back to the other question, formal. Having a formal program is very important because, again, you're getting the insights from the instructor. Even if it's like in our school, we have an online independent study course, they still have access to our tutors, to myself and the staff to be able to ask questions, whether they want to send it through. We use Band app for communication for group texts and stuff. You can text me directly. You can call me, things like that. So they at least have the same support as if they were going to go through a live class.
I think that this is a really great spot to put a pin in this episode and take a short break, because when we come back, I actually want to start picking everybody's brains about a little list. And Bob, you already know how much I hate checklists, but like a to-do list on what it actually takes to create a sterile processing program. All right, hang on tight, everybody. We'll be right back. It's time for our mid-episode confidence boost, where we focus on a key sterile processing test concept. Now, there's no guarantee these concepts will be on the test that you take, but they are key concepts to the workplace and are discussed in the literature. Today, we'll cover passivation. The biggest difference between surgical and floor-grade instruments is the manufacturing process, passivation. The final stage of the surgical grade instrument is when passivation occurs. This is a chemical process that makes the instrument more resistant to corrosion, rust, and stains by improving its resistance and reaction to elements that may present themselves during the procedure or cleaning process. The process involves 3 steps: component cleaning, an acid bath immersion, and then testing and certification. Passivation ultimately prolongs the instrument's use life and can lower maintenance costs while giving the instrument this nice smooth look. If the passivation layer is damaged, rust and corrosion can occur. Steam sterilization and water-soluble lubricants reinforce the passivation layer. That's going to wrap this week's mid-session confidence boost. Good luck. Hey everybody, thanks for joining us. What do you guys think about the mid-session confidence boosts? I really enjoy discussing key concepts in sterile processing. Again, there's no guarantee that they'll be on your certification test, but like all of our awesome guests are talking about today, they are concepts that will be in your sterile processing practice when you get into the department. And speaking about in the department, Bobby, our work BFF, has a very strong mission of making sure we're incorporating education into the department. And, you know, Bobby, I feel like you're almost an advocate, a champion for really, if we could give Bobby Parker a classroom, he would put sterile processing professionals in there for a number of hours a day. Am I right, Bobby? What do you think?
That is totally right. I was part of a sterile processing department here in Louisville that went through a new construction. And one of the things I was most excited about that was we were going to have a classroom space, like an education space for sterile processing. And then the plan got shrunk and we had to cut all the fat off the project. So the education room went away. So dreams were crushed in that moment. But yes, I do think that there is a really high value on having good quality education at the technician level that's easy to access, that's tied to what they're doing on a daily basis. That is what the mission of Beyond Clean is about. That is why the podcast got started, because we want for those technicians who are in a department that are maybe led by an OR leader that doesn't have a lot of knowledge or experience with sterile processing, they're not going to the annual conferences. We want them getting access to good quality education. And so what that looks like from a sterile processing onboarding and training perspective, in my mind, is not just pairing that person with an experienced preceptor who's been here for 20 years and have them, learn to do it the way Sally does it, but instead having a very focused, documented training program that walks the new technician through the study material such that they're getting the hands-on experience of the tasks in the department. At the same time, they're being assigned to read that curriculum in their book. And so you get to touch a lot of different learning styles by throwing it all at them that way in the beginning. And we've talked about this a couple of times, Sarah, so I don't want to belabor this, but the way that applies right now is you described me as, the champion of SPD education. I will accept that knighthood. I appreciate that. Some of what I do now with Beyond Clean and doing clinical service consulting, as we go into departments and do assessments of accreditation risks and workflow opportunities, one of the things that surprises people while we're there and working with them is how much I want to spend with their SOPs and their training program. And the majority of facilities that I go to, Sarah, they don't have a documented training program. It's just that there's maybe a generic 90-day evaluation that they sign off at the end. And beyond that, it's work with Sally because we want you to do it the way that she does it. And that's almost always one of my recommendations to them is I give them a skeleton of how do you go about building a good 90-day training program, an onboarding program that prepares them at the end of your orientation, not only to be a better technician and to have good quality in their work, but also to be equipped and prepared to be able to self-study through that exam.
And it's almost like, when I teach my CBSPD based course, which keep in mind, these programs aren't created by these associations and organizations. The resources are given to professionals like Harry, Chanté, myself, Bobby, and we take it and make it applicable towards your certification test. These are not given from these organizations. They're not approved by these associations. So they're really of the organic genuineness of your instructor and the facility that's housing them. Like I work at a community college, so I have a lot of markers that I have to hit, almost like standardized testing I have to meet in a classroom. So when you're taking these certification programs that are made by the individuals, and then even inside of the department, they have certain lengths, right? Like mine is 16 weeks. It's once a week for 4.5 hours. I know it's a long class, but I'm geared more towards professionals that have very robust working lives, and five labs. That's my program. Do I wish it was more? Yes, but that's just where we're at right now, right? And then Harry, how long is one of your programs?
Our program typically runs about 4 months. I structured the program for individuals that are either working in the field or brand new to the field, but they have a job. So students get with me once a week where I cover 2 chapters each week and I lecture. Otherwise, they're on their own. They are doing self-study at home during the week on the 2 chapters. And so it takes just about 4 months to be able to get through the didactic portion of the curriculum.
Right. And then you have Bobby speaking on making sure we have robust onboarding and training. And Bobby, in your opinion, how long should that onboarding be? In some facilities, it's like 2 weeks. You start in decon, go. How does that look for you?
That's
how
the
long
challenge.
Is that?
That's the challenge with it. And I actually had a really good discussion with John Kimsey from the Beyond Clean Expert series as the sterile processing leadership expert. And he was talking about in his facilities having a 120-day training program. And my eyes kind of rolled in the back of my head because like all the power to him. But I know that's a tough sell for a lot of administrators because they want to know how quick can you get this new person up to speed and fill that vacancy that you have. Hospitals often don't have 4 months to get somebody competent. And so the training program that I recommend and have shared materials with facilities is a 12-week one that gets you right up to that 90-day evaluation period. But to your point, Sarah, sometimes there's work to be done even before you get to that stage of getting the breathing room from your administration to have permission to spend one-on-one precepting time and concentrated education time for that full 90 days, because that is a big ask.
Right. So we're looking at a 16-week or 4-month program. Harry's working in the same 4-month window in a different way, I'm sure, because we're not the same people, right? Bobby's looking at hopefully a 90-day. And then Chanté, how long is one of your programs?
Our in-person program is 22 weeks. We do a chapter a week about, filtered in with labs, but it's 5 hours a week. We offer evening classes, Monday, Wednesday night, or day classes Tuesday, Thursday morning. So it's geared to people that work. We all work different shifts. So we have a night course for those that work day. We have a day course for those that work at night. But yeah, we do 22 weeks. We pretty much broke it down about a chapter a week because some of those chapters are just big. Like the first week is chapter 1 and 2 because they're not big. But chapter 3 is big. So I take 1 week to teach chapter 3 because I'm like, you are working. You don't want to have to put all of that onto someone. I'm thinking about me. That's how I kind of created the course. I'm thinking about what would I want to do. If I see chapter 3, I have to get up and go to work. Some of them, I don't have children, but some people have children. You know what I mean? You're going to look at chapter 3 and be like, I'll just get the class and figure it out. You know what I mean? So that's why we broke it up like that. And a lot of people are like, oh my God, 22 weeks. But it goes by fast. Like my class right now is already halfway through the book. And it feels like we just started. So it goes fast, but it helps because it lets them digest it easier.
Right. So, and the point I'm working to with this is we're all different and we're all creating a curriculum that we think is the best and the most sound. It sounds like we've all really been considerate of our potential students, even the students in the department. Bobby's making sure that they're learning how while they're learning why. And, you guys are taking the approach. And the main thing I want to point out here is length of time varies. And we're all teaching not essentially the same thing, but we're all trying to relay an importance of a profession in what we think is the best way, right? So now if somebody was going to self-study, all right, we're clearly big proponents for a sterile processing program. But if someone was not in a position, like their closest sterile processing school is 20 miles away and they don't have a car and they don't have the internet, those are luxuries that some people don't have. when you all create your sterile processing program, what is some of the actionable steps we could give them that maybe we use in that space? Just a little bit. We want to give away all the secrets, but what is one thing that you would suggest specifically that they could do to build their own curriculum?
Want me to go first? I would say don't rely just on the book. You have to do extra research if you're going to do a self-study and not have a program to go to. So get your book and read it, but also do the networking portion of it. Like you're going to have to get online. You're going to maybe listen to the Beyond Clean podcast. Go on LinkedIn and find out who else is in sterile processing. You're going to have to do some extra work to find out more about it. The book is just like the spine of it and the basic foundation. But if you're going to want to know that why, you're going to have to do research. You can't just rely on the book.
Right. Oh, that's so insightful. And, speaking on networking and understanding your professional community, make sure you guys stick with us the entire season because we actually have a guest coming on named Jamie Shalosky, and she talks about the importance of building your professional community as somebody who is studying to take their test. Harry, what's one little piece of actionable item that somebody could use in their self-study journey?
Well, my suggestion, and it ties into when you asked Chanté earlier, her study style. My actionable suggestion is when you're studying, break up your study sessions. I've done some research. Research has shown that if you try to read through an entire chapter, book, or whatever all at once, you'll remember about the first 15 minutes of what you read and the last 15 minutes of what you read. So my suggestion to anybody out there is read for about 20 minutes. I used to tell people take a half-hour break. I did a little bit more research. Come to find out you only need to take about a 10 to 15-minute break in between to recharge your brain. And another thing, while you're reading, I am not a person who takes notes. Because when I go back to my notes, I don't understand what I write. I have chicken scratch. So what I do is I actually record what I'm reading. I read out loud. So that way I can listen to myself in the car as I'm going down and I can hear the chapter over and over again because I'm an audio learner is how I do things. So read for 20 minutes, take 10-minute breaks in between, and record yourself, read it out loud, because while you're reading, you're looking at the material, you're interpreting what it says, you're saying it out loud, and you're hearing yourself say it. So you're actually absorbing the information more than just one way. And that's what I would suggest.
And Bobby, I'm really interested in what little nugget you have there, just because your approach is incorporating the department while we're learning. What's something that maybe someone in that position can do to really help build that spine that Chanté keeps referring to as, outlining what they need to study?
Well, first of all, I just want to say I'm kind of jealous of what Harry and Chanté get to do. And I guess you as well, Sarah, because I think getting to sit over and preside over some students and kind of see them through their journey, and then, sending your little sea turtles out to out to sea, sounds really awesome. And, I've been told many times I could have and should have been a math teacher. I kind of have Ben Stein's sense of humor, and would have really embraced that role. So I think being a formal instructor would be a lot of fun. So I'm jealous in that regard. But if a formal program either isn't an option for your folks, or maybe there isn't one that's easily available to you, at least in person, one thing that I would say, if you're trying to go from 0 to 60 as a leader to set up a formal training program, and you're like, we don't have 120 days of focused time to be doing one-on-one precepting. We don't have a department educator. It's just me and my techs. Where do I start? I would say something that you can throw together in a half hour that will get you part of it there is just create a reading schedule through the book that matches up with your precepting schedule, and then ask them to be doing that reading. Now, as as we've said a number of times along the way, there's no way that they're going to absorb all of that during their precepting. They're already probably information overloaded, but at least have them skim through that alongside, so that they're getting both of those touch points together. And then maybe along the way after through their orientation period, you could work with them or create some study groups to try to help them get the rest of the way to being, exam ready. But that would be kind of my half-hour tip of how to get off the ground, is start with that one resource, that one sheet of paper of a reading schedule to get through the book during precepting.
And I like how you touched on a limitation in that explanation, Bobby, because we all want ideal learning environments, right? Whether it's in the classroom, online, brick and mortar. I personally thrived in a brick and mortar setting because I needed someone to tell me when I did my assignment and what time I needed to be there so I could still show up late anyways. But anyways, so it's like, understanding your own limitations is really important. But as an instructor, I've also experienced some limitations with my program and my instruction. I think the biggest thing that I have to pay attention to when I instruct is that people don't understand sterile processing jargon. And it really resonates with the fact that I don't believe in the term common sense in sterile processing. I believe everything we know in sterile processing, which may have become second nature to us over time, common sense just does not exist. We've had to learn it at some point. We never knew it, right? So I personally suffer from using jargon in my classroom with a group of professionals. Sometimes I'll get the person that's already in the field and they'll get the corny jokes that unfortunately you all have had to deal with today. But a lot of the times I'll say, oh, just run a Bowie. And they're like, I have no idea what that, and that's just Bowie. That's part of the name. That's hardly jargon. But I'm like, yeah, you run a Bowie and you put it over the drain. And they're like, blank stares, and they're like, yeah, okay, a drain. They're probably thinking about a shower, you know what I mean? Or their kitchen sink. So I know me personally, that's a limitation I've experienced, is having to make sure that I take a step back and really explain a concept and not even assume that there's a baseline understanding for it. And I think that's huge as an instructor, to be able to, I don't want to say swallow your pride, but really take that perception and raise your empathy levels to understand where your students are coming from, more from their, they have kids or they have their personal life and things like that, but even understanding where they're coming from mentally and education. Did they finish high school? Have some of them taken college? I gave college a good try. It was a good time, but anyways, we don't have those letters after my name yet. So, understanding where people come from mentally and, comprehension wise is a huge thing that me as an instructor, I had to heavily focus on and really correct in myself. Harry, was there ever a situation like that for you where you had to take a step back because you experienced a limitation in your program?
Well, I think the limitation I had is when I first decided to teach the program. I'm one of the last approved instructors of the Isham era, and I go every year to the conference, and every year I go to the educator forum to keep that status. But when I think my limitation was myself, my cockiness I could do this, no problem. And so when I first got the materials that was given to us by HSPA, earlier Isham, I basically shot from the hip, and it took a while. I got very lucky because at this point I had over 20 years experience in the field. So as I was seeing the slides for the first time, I was just reading them and I'm like, okay, in my mind real quick, what do I think this means? Knock on wood, I got it right. But I think it's very important that anybody who plans on teaching the program go through the material, because, for instance, there's one section in the book that talks about turnover, in the original PowerPoint slides. And is it talking about turnover of instrumentation, or is it talking about staff turnover? In the book, it talks about both, but in the original PowerPoints, I finally had to go back into the book and come to find out. And what I would do is when I came to that section, I taught them about both turnovers of instrumentation and staff turnover, to finally come and find out that they were talking about instrument turnover. and not staff turnover.
Oh, see, and you know, especially when you come from that management approach, like I'm not saying that we don't think about turnover and instrumentation and like in stock levels, but when you're a leader, you automatically think of retention because, you know, C-suite's like, why aren't people staying? And we have tons of, so I like that you've owned that and literally taking the same words and applying it in different spaces. Chanté, what's a part of your sterile processing instructor background that you've experienced as a limitation?
Just because I explain something one way doesn't mean all the students sitting in front of me understand it.
Oh.
So while I can say it this way to you, and you're like, oh, okay, I get it now. This one over here is looking like a deer in headlights because they don't understand what the heck I just said. So having to learn how to chop it up multiple different ways and into digestible pieces was something that I had to learn.
Oh, and that sounds a lot like the point Harry was relaying and something we talked about SMART goals earlier in this season, you know, is just because one person learns and studies one way doesn't mean it, you know, works for the next person. Definitely. I like listening to podcasts, but kudos to Harry. I still haven't listened to some of my presentations because I can't get over the sound of my own voice. So there's entire presentation, right? So there's entire presentations by Sarah B. Cruz that I have just never revisited. And I'm like, nope, that's just going to stay in a digital history forever.
For our online course, I actually teach the slides. It's self-study, but it's not like they're just reading our slides. Like I'm actually, they can hear my voice and I'm actually teaching it. When I have a new instructor come on board, I send that to them so they can see how we do it here at iSpy. And I'm like, I don't know how you can stand my voice. Like I have not listened to them at all. I don't know what they sound like. I heard they sound great, but I was like, I'm not listening to that because I don't want to hear me. Like I can't do it.
I like that. I think that's great. It makes me think about when I teach dynamic air removal in my class, I often refer to it as tightening a corset. And I actually had to explain what a corset was for people to understand the analogy.
Oh, wow.
So, you know, because every time you tighten a corset, you take a deep breath and you go, and that's like the deep pulls. And the moment I explained it, like I literally had to pause the screen share to bring up a picture. And I'm like, this is how it works. And then of course, right when I did it, and I've had feedback where it's like, Sarah, I've taken the test and I thought of the corset and I remembered the deep air purges. And I even remembered what a drain was. And I felt so fulfilled as an instructor in that moment. I love getting feedback from the students saying, hey, that really worked for me and the way you explained it was great. I love that you record the classes and I can revisit them, or thank you for showing that laparoscopic procedure while you were talking about testing laparoscopic equipment for cracks. You know, Harry, it's got to feel great when you get that feedback from students, right?
Yeah, I actually have the way my school's set up is that I don't get the feedback anymore. I hired an educator or a tutor, so who's much smarter than me. So I think that's key in business is hiring people that are smarter than you to handle all of this. And he's taken the information that he gets from the students and is able to upgrade his study guide is constantly changing based on the information that is given feedback from the students when they've taken the exam. And then he shares that information with me. And what it does is it just reinforces that I know that I have the right information in my curriculum.
Yet another benefit to having and participating in a sterile processing program, you benefit from the evolution of content from feedback. This was such a good episode. I wish we could go longer, but you know, most of our episodes are a little bit shorter, but this one was just so good. So I just want to recognize everybody that hung out with us the entire length of this great panel discussion about sterile processing schools. But I'm going to pitch it to my friend Bobby over here because he's going to give you your homework assignment. You can't get out that easily. Bobby, what do we got for them?
So I've got two ideas here. Let's talk first to our technicians who are maybe going through this study journey themselves. We've talked about programs quite a bit already throughout this certification podcast, although maybe this is the first episode you're joining us on. So my homework to you, as we've kind of teased some of the benefits of programs like what Harry and Chanté are leading, is to find out what options might be out there for you and just do your research and take a critical eye at what is available to you. I've said a couple of times on here that I didn't have that kind of offering available to me, but I'm a bit of a dinosaur now. And so, and as you said, the age of COVID has made everything more available, made us more connected, things available online. So there may be some options available to you on the internet. So my homework to you would be go see what options are available to you. It might be more convenient and more affordable than what you're expecting. So keep an open mind to it. The second group of people that I want to talk to are leaders who might be listening to this podcast, trying to figure out how they can help technicians in their department. And, the obvious one would be to build out your training program and make it more effective for the technicians in your department. But I also want you to think about the technicians who might be in your region who are looking for an opportunity. If you live in one of those areas where there are sterile processing schools, chances are there's a pretty big network of individuals out there who are looking for internship opportunities where they can start getting some of those hands-on working hours to work towards their certification and to kind of get that leg up of experience into the department. So if you don't currently have a partnership with a school where you're taking interns in your department, maybe explore some partnerships with schools in your area and see what that might look like as a benefit that you can give to this industry and giving good quality education and training and experience to some of those technicians. And it might also help your workflow while you're at it of having some of those interns in the department. So I know we didn't get to touch too much, Sarah, on that internship hours piece of it. It's a big component of this discussion around formal training programs, but I think departments ought to be more open to the idea of helping those schools out and participating in those internships.
And while Bobby speaks to the leadership in that space, as a technician or somebody preparing for their certification test, feel free to revisit our episode on internship hours and how to go about inserting yourself into a facility before you might need them. Chanté, Harry, and of course, my friend Bobby, today was awesome. Thank you all so much for coming.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Always a pleasure.
All right, everybody, make sure you hang out with us next week. And of course, take that test with confidence. And that's going to do it for this week's episode. For more sterile processing education and resources, make sure to visit beyondclean.net or follow Beyond Clean on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. And don't forget to check out over 1,000 SPD-related videos at youtube.com/beyondclean. If you have any questions or comments for the show, you can reach out to info@beyondclean.net. Finally, make sure to download the Beyond Clean mobile app on the Apple and Android app stores so that you don't miss a future episode of any of the other awesome Beyond Clean podcasts. My name's Sarah B. Cruz, and you've been listening to Confidence Certification. Until next time, keep fighting dirty and pass that test with confidence.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast series are of Sarah B. Cruz only and do not represent the companies she works for or collaborates with.